on the channel, we like to take a deep dive into some older Call of Duty games every so often and explore the history, but also how the game is today. We've done a few retrospective looks already this year, and today I want to keep that going a little bit more with a look at Black Ops 3 in 2020. It's honestly really strange to me to think that in less than 2 weeks this game is going to be half a decade old. That just doesn't seem right to me at all, but that's the reality of it. So when I jumped on the game, which was surprisingly still installed on my PlayStation 4 hard drive, my burning question of how does it hold up today was of course at the forefront of my mind. And that's what we hope to answer with today's video. As we go along, let me know your thoughts down below. What did you think of Black Ops 3, either 1 in its prime or 2 in recent years? As well, if you enjoyed the game, what was your favorite part of the year that it offered? Let me know down below, but as well, if you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you have not done so already, as we're on that road to 400,000 subscribers, and with a new Black Ops entry just around the corner, we'll keep you up to date with everything you'll need to know in relation to it. That said, let's jump into Black Ops 3 in 2020. Now, we normally discuss the game at large in these videos, but let's answer the more immediate questions of how it is right now today. A few things fundamentally first. It's definitely a different feel. Boots on the ground versus thruster and chain-based movement systems are worlds different, and having a few years now of being back at boots on the ground, it definitely took some getting used to overall, but you'll get the hang of it again. Fluidity of the movement also is something that I stand by my statement in the last retrospective video. I definitely think that Infinite Warfare took Black Ops 3 system and definitely polished it off quite a bit. So having gone from Infinite Warfare in my recent recollection to now Black Ops 3 feels a little bit choppier, but still the pace is up there. For the gameplay itself, starting out, really I guess the question is how easy is it to find lobbies? Because player count in this game isn't actively advertised. This was actually, I believe, the first game that player count wasn't publicly displayed correctly, but it did even show up in a beta, which again was another first for the franchise as well, but never made its way over into the full game. Finding lobbies though wasn't half bad. It was something that only took a little bit of time. In some cases it was instantaneous, but it's something that will likely depend on when you play, what region you're in, and other more meta factors. One thing that I will say about finding games though is that I did find the same lobbies quite a few times, with a couple of cases of going into games 3-4 times in a row where I'd back out, wait a little bit for that lobby to hopefully start up and fill up, and then end up finding myself right back into that lobby that I had just left. But overall, the player base itself, in terms of, say, skill-wise, was just kind of how I remembered it. Lots of games that you could absolutely fry in, go on a tear, go on your streaks, but others where it would be competitive. Admittedly, I did find a ton of lower ranked lobbies in the game now that it's going on 5 years, because that may just be people that found it on a discount, something that they went back and didn't really care all that much, whatever the case may be. But every lobby there'd be probably one person to give me a run for my money, but for the most part you could actually chill out and play, which is definitely nice. No skill-based matchmaking, which we'll talk about like in recent games. Though I will say, to preface that discussion, is that some of these clips you'll see, yes, probably look like I'm sweating, but if it were an actual sweat lobby, I wouldn't be able to make half these kills happen. But for the topic of skill-based matchmaking, it's nice that there isn't any, or at least not the skill-based matchmaking that we're necessarily used to. Skill-based matchmaking is in some capacity in every Call of Duty game, but it's not the main priority like it is in Modern Warfare. Matchmaking valued connection in Black Ops 3, and then it would sort lobbies. Party-based systems were also included here at this, so if you played in larger parties, you'd likely have a higher chance of being matched with other parties. But connection was priority, then once those 12 players were chosen, you'd have that match and team balancing from there, which is, I think, how it should be. So it was nice to be able to have that ability to just chill out in some regard. In terms of mechanically, the gameplay itself had a lot to discuss. Movement, of course, was something that was newer and kind of a toned down version of what we saw with Advanced Warfare the year before, but going back to it, it's something that I'd still probably take Infinite Warfare's movement system over it, just the fluidity of it all. The gunplay of Black Ops 3 has always been a little bit memorable here, but some of the things that you may notice going back is that there's definitely weapons with no recoil on some of them. ICR in particular, quite literally a laser beam. So kind of weird to see that and have no real fighting factors when aiming down sight and shooting like in recent games. Automatic healing, again, as always, takes me a little bit to get used to, because we see it in games like in Modern Warfare where it's something that you probably use it a lot, but in Black Ops 4 last year it was something that was the only way to heal yourself was manual healing, so definitely weird to go back and not have that at all. Hit detection, admittedly, I thought was pretty bad. I don't know if that's just the product of some of these matches being spread thin amongst different players in different regions, making it work, or if it was just Black Ops 3. I can't remember how it was back in its prime, but there are definitely times where I'm like, how in the world did those shots not connect? So that's something to consider if you go back and take a look at it. One thing that was definitely, I thought, bad that I didn't even realize was a thing until I played a little bit here with it was that there's a few game-breaking glitches that can happen right now in which you can modify your specialist to have things that you really shouldn't. I ended up dying to somebody using a glitched account with Seraph having a Tempest. That doesn't work like that. You have combat focus and then the Annihilator as Seraph. Additionally, from what I'm told, there's also another one going around right now where there's unlimited Ripper, so that increased melee lunge and one hit is certainly something you don't want to go up against. So that's something you may encounter as well. But that is Black Ops 3 in 2020, and overall it was a relatively decent gameplay experience. Again, definitely a different era of Call of Duty, if you will, with of course the movement being prioritized in a different way, but overall it was an enjoyable experience that was definitely different than what we're used to in, say, Modern Warfare. But let's talk about some of the game at large here. Personally, I think there's a lot to talk about that Black Ops 3 definitely introduced in a cool way. Let's start with some of the single player fan stuff. Campaign. The campaign produced a few memorable moments like
outcome, train go boom.
But it didn't really quite hit the mark as a Black Ops campaign. I think that if it was its own thing, it probably would have been received a little bit better, but being tied into the Black Ops universe, it didn't quite hit the mark, partly because there were a lack of ties to the overall Black Ops universe. We only had very brief mentions of the Nova Gas and then ties to Raul Menendez 40 years earlier in the storyline, but that was it. It also didn't help that a lot of the campaign's plot and story arc was finished before you ever really knew it began, with the only real mission of the storyline being the first and everything else to follow being hallucinations as a part of the DNI sequencing. But what was also kind of cool was that outside of campaign, we saw the narrative direction continued for the first time in a Call of Duty game. Previously, our storylines were only confined to campaign and zombies if available, but Black Ops 3's specialists actually had a backstory, making it multiplayer a platform for a narrative and a storyline as well. Now, as you played along and unlocked more about your operator, you learned more and more about their backstory, with the story shaping up that the entire world of MP was actually a simulation, something that took these combat fighters and put them into a digital combat sim to be sold off to the highest bidder. There was a spy among them as well that would report back to the higher organization behind it, which unfortunately the resolution of this was never really written in. And it didn't help that Black Ops 4, the next installment, actually was a prequel which then explored the same specialist universe but before the events of said simulation in Black Ops 3. So that open ending may never actually get a resolution, unfortunately, but it was cool to see. Nightmares was also introduced within Black Ops 3 and was a kind of cool spin to the campaign, though admittedly it probably wasn't what many thought it was going to be when initially marketed as a zombies campaign. But I guess in all fairness, technically it was a zombies campaign, the campaign replayed with a slightly different perspective and zombies as AI. But speaking of zombies, I thought the offering for zombies in Black Ops 3 was incredible, with not only a decent introduction to the storyline and some great maps like Drak and Revelations, but the best-selling PlayStation 4 DLC of all time was included with Black Ops 3 and The Way of Zombies Chronicles, a remastered DLC pack with tons of classics like Ascension, Origins, Shangri-La, Shinonuma, Kino der Toten, Moon, Verrucht, and Nocturne Toten. I got to relive some of my fondest memories for zombies again on current-gen hardware, which, with a switch to the next generation with Black Ops Cold War, I'd be more than happy to see a Zombies Chronicles 2 in the future. So Treyarch, if you somehow find this video, definitely do it. But also introduced with zombies was the introduction of not only the storyline of Dr. Monty, but Dr. Monty's factory, introducing gobblegums for added ways to play the game and added power-ups. But also a little later on in the cycle of the game, we saw Newton's cookbook, taking that gobblegum functionality and giving you a new way to spin life into it, where you could take your lesser valued gobblegums and cook it into something else you may find more valuable. On the multiplayer side of things, I thought there were a decent offering of the maps that we had throughout the year. Some of the DLC maps got really creative, really cool, and kind of zany in some cases. Streaks were definitely solid. Specialists we've talked about here on the channel a couple of times, especially because they were recently in Black Ops 4, but I think that in Black Ops 3, specialists were handled how they should have been. In Black Ops 4, I hated the fact that you were basically guaranteed a lethal and a tactical of some kind. With Black Ops 3, though, you only had the option of one or the other based upon whatever you ended up choosing and their charge times. You weren't necessarily handed a streak ender. I mean, you could be, but it wasn't something as frequent as Black Ops 4. Camos I thought were absolutely phenomenal within Black Ops 3. I loved some of the designs that we had here at this, some of the throwbacks, some of the new ones that were actually our first real looks at reactive formats of camos. A few camos in the past had done a little bit of animation, but this was really the first time there was a main focal point for camos moving all about and having some cool stuff. Into the Void and Cosmic being two of my favorite camos as well. And also, even though it's a static camo, this is still the home of what I'd consider the most rare camo of all time, of the COD XP camo, but definitely some cool introductions throughout the main year of support and the content season there. Other stuff that was pretty cool within Black Ops 3 was some of the weapon customization. I mean, we had a lot of depth here to this. We saw things like Gunsmith, where you could end up crafting your own variations of different weapons, kind of like a very basic fundamental version of what we have within Modern Warfare, where you could sort of prefab different builds for weapons and then just simply add them into your create a class. The paint shop was a really cool introduction as well, and something that I would like to see return in future Call of Duties, where you could make your own custom weapon camo. I know that I had a couple of different builds for weapons where I'd take some classic camos in, say, CSGO and recreate them within Black Ops 3. So that was really cool to have, say, an Asimov KN in Black Ops 3, if I remember correctly. It was just really cool to be able to make your own custom camo with that, and I really enjoyed it. Weapon kits were something in Zombies that you could end up getting, again, custom blueprints kind of weapons, but for zombies, that was always cool. Free run was an interesting addition that I don't think many really ever utilized all that much, but it was cool to kind of get your bearings and challenge yourself with the movement within Black Ops 3, so that was something that was cool added in. Theater mode, of course, being a returning staple for Black Ops games, was a lifesaver. As a content creator, that's something that I lived for. As somebody that may just play the game regularly, if you don't do anything creatively with Call of Duty, you just use it to play, which there's nothing wrong with that at all. It may not be something you used all that much, but theater mode is seriously a lifesaver, man. It was great to have in Black Ops 3, it was great to have in Black Ops 4, and I'm happy to see it returning in Black Ops Cold War. I just wish all games would introduce it, but that's something that we don't seem to have happen. So that was something reintroduced with Black Ops 3. But the final thing that I think we're going to close on here in relation to the discussions of features within Black Ops 3 is unfortunately a bad one, but I wanted to get the cool stuff out of the way, the stuff that I liked, without it being overshadowed by what I thought was the worst part of Black Ops 3, that being the black market and supply drops. This game was at the height of the supply drop milking era, if you ask me. Advanced Warfare really kicked it off, but Black Ops 3 was so much worse. Supply drops ended up having a ton of filler content in their drop pool, with things like emblem layers, attachment variants, specific weapon camos, not camos you could apply to any weapon, but you had to get it for that specific weapon you wanted, and even the very worst, weapons themselves. And the worst part about all of this was that it was one giant pool with no real modifiers that allowed you to have a better chance to get something else than any other item. It was all the same odds, which were truly ridiculously low in terms of percentages for if you were trying to, say, get a weapon that you wanted out of a drop. To this day, I'm still missing half a dozen to a dozen weapons that I just never pulled because it was next to impossible. A lot of them even coming after the first year of support, and I went back and played during Infinite Warfare's year because I was just tired of playing Infinite Warfare and Modern Warfare Remastered, so I went back and played a little bit of Black Ops 3. Still don't have those items. The one thing though that I will give this system is that we did see the inclusion of contracts for the first time, which these have been adjusted and worked on for the last couple of years now, to the point where they're much more consumer friendly now than they were back then, but it was something that it offered a free way to get a specific item. You weren't guaranteed anything, but you had at least a chance of a weapon, of a camo or something like that. Was it an absurd grind? Absolutely. I think the one contract that kept popping up was the triple play contract for 125 wins or something like that, 75 to 125. I think it varied depending on which introduction it was, but it was definitely nice to see that you had an option to be able to get at least one of those items you wanted for free rather than having to sift through hundreds of supply drops. But again, where I give it to it is that this set the precedent and started to alleviate some of the supply drop only mentality. We started to see in coming years new ways to introduce weapons that were grindable and earnable for free, to the point now where we have things within the first couple of hours of game time, really over the course of a season, that you get the new weapons for free regardless of if you paid for a season pass or regardless if you put money into the DLC system. You could have those items for free. But overall, the black market still, I think, the biggest blemish on what was Black Ops 3's legacy, and unfortunately, that's kind of how it was too within Black Ops 4. But that is Black Ops 3 in 2020. Overall, was it something that I enjoyed going back and playing? I think yes. I really had a good time playing around with just some casual pacing of the game and experiencing some of this game that I loved so much back in the day. So that's where we're gonna wrap it up. I would love to get your thoughts and feedback down there in the comment section down below. If you guys go back, what do you guys think here of this? Is it something you enjoyed the game in its prime today, whenever it may be? Whatever it is, let me know your thoughts. But hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you drop a like down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Call of Duty, including some retrospective looks like this, and as well Modern Warfare, Warzone, and soon to be Black Ops Cold War content on a daily basis. If you're interested, hit that subscribe button. If you also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to get connected outside of YouTube. I live on both those. If you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. That said, thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.